Should independent candidates and their supporters support the yes campaign, the no campaign, or abstain by spoiling their ballots, not voting, or writing something else on their referendum paper? The format's going to be 5 minutes from each side, 5 minutes countering. We're going to open to the floor for questions for 15 minutes, and then we are going to have summations of 5 minutes.
If I believed AV would be a democratic improvement, I'd be sitting on the other chair right now. But AV is a costly distraction, a half-hearted political sticking plaster. We are arguing about change, and a shift to AV is a move from a clear system to a complicated one. It's not about voting 1, 2, 3 with AV, it's the algebra of what happens next. You still have tactical voting, only now it becomes complicated as you have to guess whether to vote first for your second choice to keep him from being knocked out if you think his votes will mostly transfer to your bottom choice. It also becomes so politicised that, as in Australia, you will end up with hidden political deals and party leaders handing out recommended voting preference cards. Vote our man first and these people in this order next. I don't think it's a democratic improvement to have deniable deals separated from the manifesto. That encourages even more deceit in politics. We can argue about the cost, but all the indicators point to counting machines being needed, as yes backers the Electoral Reform Society themselves admitted in a confidential but now leaked report. The total end bill will be in the order of £750 million. 2/5 of those costs, sadly, we can't escape from now, but the rest we can. AV is a distraction because, yes, politics is busted. That's why I've been campaigning to fix it for a number of years now. But AV won't mend things, it'll just create a wafer-thin veneer that'll soon rub off. Accountability comes with the power of recall for disgraced sitting MPs, not AV. It comes with transparency over expenses and actions, not AV. It comes with citizens' initiatives, not AV. It comes with political parties opening up their selection processes, not AV. If AV really made a change, then you'd be looking at hundreds of seats possibly changing hands. Instead, you're looking at possibly 30 to 40. And funnily enough, it's overwhelmingly to the benefit of the Lib Dems, which explains why they seized that offer rather than sticking up for students during the coalition negotiations. A prelude, I fear, to the part they will play as the only permanent members of AV coalition governments to come. As independent candidates, I'm afraid your lot will not be improved under AV. While the protest or issue vote will partially rise, the flip side is also that there will be a net increase in appeals for those specific votes. In this room, you may have an excellent campaign going on the issue of a bypass or saving a clinic that has voters fired up and voting for you. But in an era of cuts, a whole plethora of campaigners will step forward to argue that they need the voter to register them as their protest vote. Every candidate will ask the voter to send a message on an issue of a particular zebra crossing, a school closure, on animal welfare issues, a police station's opening times, even national issues for the larger parties, over the EU, global warming, third world debt, or even, say, the Gurkhas. Now, I applaud such diversity, just as I applaud the immense input everyone in this room is providing into our democracy. But let's not kid ourselves. There will be an impossible bidding war for those protest votes, and I'm sorry, it won't end up with any of you being elected as an MP. Of course, the biggest controversy over Lent first votes comes with one party in particular. Perhaps we may have some time to talk about the impact of AV on extremists. I hope so. It's a real concern in an environment of transferable voting, as the recent French cantonal elections have shown. First past the post is not brilliant. Perhaps we need some form of proportional representation to hear more of the voices present in this room. A vote for AV, however, dooms that possibility for a generation, as the new system needs time to bed in. Vote no if you want to continue the debate on how to change Britain's democracy. Vote yes if you want to be stuck with this miserable little compromise. Thank you.
Unsurprisingly, I think that you should be backing the Yes campaign and voting yes on May the 5th, for the simple reason that alternative vote is a better system for electing our MPs. I've heard very little in the way of positive arguments from the No campaign about why first past the post is better, but we do have positive arguments about alternative vote, and I hope that you will find them as convincing as I do. I'm sure many of you are familiar by now with how AV works, but if your memories need refreshing. At the ballot box, rather than putting a single cross next to your preferred candidate, as you do now, you will number as many or as few candidates as you want in order 1, 2, 3. And for those like David Cameron who seem to be implying that this is complicated, putting a list in order of preference is something that we have in our Key Stage 1 syllabus that we teach to 7-year-olds. At the count, the first preferences are added up, and if somebody has a majority, over 50% of the vote, then they win outright. If nobody has a majority, the bottom candidate is eliminated and their second preferences are redistributed, and that happens until somebody has over 50% of the vote. It means that every MP in Parliament will have some level of support from at least half of their constituents, rather than the third of MPs that have over 50% at the moment. It will make them reach out to more people rather than just relying on their core vote, canvassing neglected neighbourhoods and wards for second preferences. It will make them more accountable to the people that they work for, and it will tackle the jobs for life culture that we saw demonstrated so spectacularly with the expenses scandal. Well, that's our main campaign messaging anyway, but today I want to give you 4 reasons why I believe that AV will be better for independence specifically and for democracy. Firstly, AV will make it easier for independents to get votes. At the moment, even many of your most ardent supporters end up voting for somebody else because they just don't think that you have any chance of winning. With alternative vote, they can put you first and someone from a party second. They can vote with both their head and their heart and know that their vote won't be wasted. The chances of independent candidates winning Westminster elections are pitifully low. The political system is massively stacked in favour of the largest parties. At least this corrects one huge failing of that system. People can actually vote for the person that they want to win. Secondly, following on from that, by making it more credible to ask people for your vote, we will raise the standing of independence and encourage more people to do it. I campaigned for an independent in last year's general election, and I know how the presence of a good non-party political candidate raises the standard of and the quality of the debate at hustings. Having somebody that can give honest answers rather than merely repeating a party line keeps all the other candidates on their toes. Independent candidates are good for democracy, and alternative vote will encourage more people to stand as independents. Thirdly, it will change the frame of the debate and make it easier to get to the real issues. One of the most common and frustrating conversations I'm sure you've all had is who can win here. Getting away from only party X can beat party Y will allow us all to get to the issues that actually affect people. And finally, it will shake party candidates out of some of their complacency and make them work as hard, or nearly as hard, as independents. I know what a struggle it is to campaign without a party machine, and it's especially galling to do so when candidates from large parties act as though they can just coast on the back of their national campaigns. With alternative vote, candidates will have to pay attention to local issues and reach out to local people. Independent candidates work hard for every vote, and party candidates should too. I believe that independent candidates play a really crucial role in the democratic process, and anything that encourages more people to stand as independents is good for us all. First past the post concentrates power in the hands of the 3 main parties, excluding the majority of people from having their say. No electoral system is perfect, and alternative vote on its own won't improve the many problems with our political system, but it will make it easier for independents to get votes, will improve their status, encourage more people to stand, make it easier to talk about real issues, and make party political candidates work almost as hard as their independent counterparts. And I think that's quite a lot to get out of the yes vote on May the 5th.
Fantastic. So, Lee, if you wouldn't mind, then if you'd like to counter Deborah.
I'm happy to debate the issue. Obviously, I have a different point of view. I don't believe anything I've said is a matter of misinformation. That's a matter of personal interpretation. But on particular issues, I'll be quite happy to riposte before closing statements. We are running a positive campaign. However, let me underline something here. We have a system of first past the post. People understand first past the post. People don't understand AV, and it's up to the AV campaign to demonstrate that their system is better. The onus is on them to endorse the change. AV, it's said AV is not complicated. Well, on a fundamental level, AV is relatively straightforward in the same way as nuclear fission is very straightforward because it's 2 atoms striking each other. It's the bit which goes before and it's the bit which goes afterwards which makes it all very complicated. It's to do with the issue of working out what's going to happen and trying to cast your vote accordingly to get the result which you still want. It's not 50% of the vote. I'm glad the Yes campaign has started to change their literature on this. It's 50% of the remaining vote in a given round, which, as we know from a recent Radio 5 broadcast means that when people do not continue casting their vote because they drop out, because they have no further preferences, their votes are no longer cast, so you can end up, as in the Radio 5 broadcast, with someone getting elected on less than 50% of the vote, which is the whole purpose of getting AV in the first place, because they're supposed to be more majoritarian, and it just isn't. 6 out of 10 in Queensland, I think it was, in the state elections, 6 out of 10 don't put more than their first preference. So the idea that it creates an outright majority is just not the case. Job for life business? No, it just changes the nature of the safe seats. You're still going to have a very, very large number of safe seats. It just changes which ones they are. I do agree that there are problems with people taking constituents for practice. I don't think in 95% of seats that AV of itself will make the slightest bit of difference. It simply, as I say, changes which seats in question, and it is a problem that some particularly some of the councils up and down the country do take the constituent for granted. I went out in the last but one general election and was bumping into constituents who were saying, "Thank God somebody from politics is coming to speak to us, because no one has come here for 20 odd years." That's not going to change under AV. I'm sorry. The independent candidates, I think that the issue is more to do, or as much to do, with how parties and the whip system operate in politics. You can still have AV, but if you don't fix the whip system, as a backbencher tried recently to do, then you're still going to have the arm twisting, which is a key issue to do with politics, and a whole number of problems that need to be fixed first before we start talking about electoral systems. If I can just sort of possibly just round up, all this talk about real issues and people, MPs being hardworking and the rest of it, I think that's slightly insulting. I know a lot of hardworking MPs who do really put in the hours. Let's not diss the entire political establishment, although many of them do deserve a kick up the backside, as part of a process, which, if AV does come in, is going to end up with an awful lot of very dissatisfied, disappointed and disillusioned voters who thought they were being given something which simply isn't the case. Thank you.
Deborah.
I would be really amazed if AV produced a more dissatisfied and disillusioned electorate than we currently have. I mean, I think it's, of course we need to fix the whip system, of course we need citizens' initiatives, of course we need the power of recall, of course we need all these things. I don't understand how not having AV makes any of those things more likely or more possible. And I don't understand how, given that we've got this opportunity, we have this moment where we can cast a vote and we can actually change something, that we would not take that in the hope that we would get another opportunity to do something else. I think the idea that getting AV will put back the case for change, if what you want is to get PR, is incredible. Charles Kennedy at our press conference last week gave the example of in 1971, where he sat there in the Scottish referendum and they lost because they didn't get enough of a turnout, and the Conservatives said, "Oh, you know, it's all right, because when we're in power we'll give you something much better, and it's actually fine that you lost this time." It took 25 years for them to get something better in terms of devolution. Like, it's a really, really slow process. We have a real dinosaur of a political system, and we have a moment for real change. In terms of tactical voting with AV, well, we currently have tactical voting. At least with AV, you've got some level of explicitness about that. You can start saying to people, like, this is what your vote means, this is what your preferences mean, rather than at the moment where you have to pretend that you're giving a real vote with your one cross, when actually an awful lot of people are giving a tactical vote. We can't tell the difference between the tactical votes and the real votes. In terms of counting machines, it's just not true. Like, the Electoral Commission and the Treasury have said that there are absolutely no plans in place to buy counting machines. But even if it was, I mean, 130 million for democracy. Like, yes, it would be cheaper not to have given women the vote. It would have been cheaper not to give working people the vote. It'd be cheaper not to have any elections at all. Why are we debating about this particular cost of democracy? In terms of the benefit to the Lib Dems, it will only be of benefit to the Lib Dems if anyone votes for the Lib Dems. If people still hate the Lib Dems, then the Lib Dems won't get any more seats. In terms of them being permanent members of an AV coalition, exactly the same. They would have to have enough seats to be in that position. If people don't want them, then we won't have them. the thing which is making coalitions more likely is the way that people are voting. In 1945, 95% of people voted for either Labour or Conservatives. Now it's down to 65%. And that's under a system which makes it almost pointless in an awful lot of seats to vote for any other party, and where turnout has dropped to 65%. First past the post is now in a position where it is more likely to produce coalitions. Now, I mean, you guys are coming from non-party political backgrounds, and I don't think, I mean, this might be a place where you want to discuss the pros and cons of having coalitions. But if you're going to defend first past the post on the basis that it produces strong government, well, it didn't produce strong government. It's actually less likely to produce strong government. I think the idea that we will get this impossible bidding war with protest votes, well, if more people pile into the, I mean, do you think that it's a bad thing that more people would stand as candidates, that more people would engage in the democratic process, that more people would be asking for people's votes? I just don't see that it's bad for democracy or bad for the democratic process to have more people out there saying this is what you can do, and encouraging people to even turn up at the polls in the first place. The idea that it's not majoritarian because it wouldn't strictly necessarily reach 50%. Well, there's a big difference between 6 out of 10 people going to the polls and putting a number 1 and treating it as first past the post, but having the option of putting 2, 3, 4, and just giving them the option of a single cross in the first place. I think it's interesting that there are quite a lot of people in the room that are on the fence, that are considering abstaining. I think when you see who's interested in the No campaign, who's behind the No campaign, it's the rich and powerful, it's the media, it's the political classes, it's the trade union barons alongside Lord Ashcroft. I think we need to be realistic about the fact that anything other than a decisive yes vote on May the 5th will be understood and told by them as politics as usual, being victorious. So do you think it's important that we get a decisive yes on May the 5th?